Hello, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Today we're talking about community in the Aquarian Age, and I brought on an extremely special guest to help us have this conversation. Um, this is Arina Matvejeva, and she is a PhD. So she's a doctor as well in economics, I believe is the doctorate. And what I one of the reasons I asked her to be honest because I have been in some of her community spaces, and I know it's a topic near and dear to her heart. That's something that she's really in the process of creating a community that can really live up to some of the ideals I have associated with the Aquarian age. And I've also been in her cacao ceremony, which is just an extremely blessed experience. I don't know how else to say it. Like, it's just a great way to be with others, but also get back to self. So and there's not a lot of places you can do that in. And so in my mind, she just has a very gracious way of bringing in our different voices, but at the same time, just creating a calm and safe space so that we can really have the exploration that we need to have during ceremony. And so, welcome, Arina. Thank you for being with us today.
Hi, Monifa. Hi, everybody. And I'm so happy that you invited me into this conversation. And like you said, it's a very special topic for me. It's a very deep topic, and it's a space for my own exploration. So I'm excited to share about it.
Yes, yes. And one of the reasons why I really wanted to have this conversation with Arena is because I feel like we are shifting a lot of things in our society, in our community right now, in our structures, in our systems, as well, part of the Aquarian feeling. And one of the things that is pointed out to me is how we group, like how we group, because so much of it's done online nowadays, obviously, and also because how we've traditionally done it, like, somebody's in the front leading, telling everybody else what to do, and what that looks like before and now. Because even on Zoom, so to speak, even on our online platforms, um, people can choose to have a more of a communal experience by going into a gallery view, right? Like if you just want to see other people's faces and just feel like you're with others, you can make that happen by a click of the button, right? Instead of it just being about the one solitary voice that's speaking at the front of the classroom. Um, One of the points of that is really about having all the voices heard. And I know that in every ceremony I've been in with you, everybody's voice has been heard. And I just wanted to hear from you um, the intentionality behind that, if there is any, and what you feel that provides.
So the intentionality behind each individual being represented
Yeah.
as a unique being. Yeah. So for me, this is really the core of a circle, I would say. So coming together in a circle in a way that is not hierarchical, and in a way that each one of us is valued and is represented and has exactly the same weight, I can say. So this principle is something that I emphasize when I do women's circle, for example, that there is no leader. I'm, of course, there as an initiator, and I'm there to create space and support safety and the emergence of trust. But I do not lead per se. So my intention is to create the space for each one of us to feel into ourselves and to find our voice and to follow the need, the drive to express something. So why is this happening and what's the intention behind that? Well, I believe it's one of the big reasons for that kind of setting and that kind of space is that this is something that we're really missing in the current society. And you started talking about this new age, the new cycle that we are stepping into. And I feel that in this cycle, what's happening is that people are becoming more present with what's inside of them. So more present with their needs, more present with their trauma, facing what's happening inside and giving it more space, or at least growing in their wish to give more space to that. And at the same time, there is no infrastructure in the society that would support the processing of all of that that's emerging inside each and every one of us. Unless, of course, we go to therapy or we see a specialist. And so I feel that there is a big need for this infrastructure to be introduced. So what that implies is a very safe space, a space where an individual can be present with what is happening and would feel enough trust to allow something to emerge. And through that emergence and through the experience of that, there is healing that happens and there is connection. There's a feeling of very deep connection and empathy that can emerge.
Right. And that's something I've also witnessed in your ceremony where people are deeply empathetic and yet and also deeply self-aware, like aware of their own emotional developments and what's happening for them, but yet still holding like amazing supportive space along with you um, in the environment. And I think that's what really, again, fascinated me about this conversation because I feel like that is what's being called for in our communities, as you said, because of this heightened awareness of having to be with ourselves and our own trauma and stories and having also to continue to function in completely new ways, right? So doing the same work in a different way can also be it's a big change. So it can feel traumatic, right? And then there's also the just the continued like anxiety, trauma from like worrying about being sick or getting sick or a family member getting sick. Or actually having the loss, if you've lost somebody in this time. And and so happens is that increasingly, and I think even some companies are recognizing this, increasingly it's going to be required to have healing or spaces in the corporate environments, in our current structures, in our current, even in our government in some ways, is having to be brought up more. Like the stress that people are going through mentally um and just being empathetic to the different transitions everybody's having to experience and deal with and making I've never heard of our tax day was postponed to May 15th in the US, and that's never happened before in my lifetime, as far as I know, since I've been a taxpayer. So it's kind of these massive empathic movements happening even in the grander structures of our society. Um, do you uh, do you have any experience? Because I know you went to a conference community. Are they having any conversations about how this is coming up in our greater societies and communities?
Yeah, I love that you're bringing this up. Um, there is indeed already some initiatives happening. What you're referring to in regards to the conference is the community building initiative, which it's work which is inspired by the body of work of Scott Peck. And this organization supports facilitating these kind of spaces of community building in different structures. So from different societal structures, in the political structure, in different minorities, etc. And what's really important, I think, to recognize is that in this process of community building, there is a possibility for each participant to realize that there's something bigger happening than just individual processes. There is, in fact, this group dynamic. There's the dynamic of the collective, which often shows some things that are less conscious. It brings up things that we might not even be aware of. So I think coming from that perspective, it's also very beneficial to do it to apply this process within organizations or within institutions, because then the benefit is so much greater than individual benefit of each of the participants. It actually creates a completely new space for the collective in
Mm.
that institution, and potentially it can create what they call in community building true community. So it brings the connection between people to a place so much beyond the differences, beyond racial, cultural differences, our backgrounds, and it really supports the connection on a very, very basic human level. It's about the heart connection. So I'm just dreaming of the world that will be really implementing this kind of process in really any area of the society, whether it's a family, whether it's just a partnership, or whether it's in a company or in a bigger organization. There's always value in that, because we go into a deeper connection, and um, there is a way to create so much greater things from that depth of connection.
Yes, because if we're only speaking to each other from the mind level, which is our ideas and you know what we want to get done, what we think the goals are, because those can be individual and differentiated, so it creates a lot of divisiveness if people are not in agreement. But when we have conversations about how we feel about things, how we feel, or what we feel is needed, and what we aspire for others to feel, right? Then we can be much more on one accord because we all have those feelings, we all have those desires, and so we recognize, oh, that's a human desire, that's a human need, and we're actually seeking the same feeling. So we can actually have more open hearted discussion because we recognize the humanity in each of our views, even if they're not in total agreement as yet. Um, and so I can see how that goes. I was also speaking to a musician in the area who was kind of appalled at our our lack of community here in Fresno, and he's from Mexico, and so he was just saying that there's like nobody, there's nobody that's holding that space of community, right? That if it's not for an end all be all goal, and that's normally money in the US, of some kind, then people aren't interested, right? And when that happens, you get kind of this disjointed, um, no, there's no place to be supported in the fabric of the community. And so we lose people. When I say lose people, I mean like to homelessness or to mental incapacitation. They can no longer hold jobs and that kind of thing. Um, and I think it's so important that this conversation is had, because essentially I feel like a lot of those things would fix themselves if there was a community there to support them to begin with. If we truly knew, understood, felt our neighbors, then we would also know a way of serving them. We would also know a way of supporting them within the fabric of the community as well. I think that's one of the main metrics of a true business, entrepreneurship, is knowing your neighbor and being able to support them or serve them in some way, right? Um, and so, yeah, it goes to the places of having other ways of supporting yourself as well, so like making money, that kind of thing. What have you seen as far as in community dynamics that you feel like could be so easily repaired if we had more of this true community happening in real time right now?
Wow. It's such a big question.
I know, it's
Um,
huge, right?
I will speak from my own experience, and I want to say that first of all, there is indeed this lack of community very often in our neighborhoods that you mentioned, and unfortunately, the only times when people do experience the drive to create that community is in times of crisis or tragedy happening, that something really quite strong, a strong circumstance, a painful circumstance that can unite people, that can show them, oh, we need just to let go of those stories that you were just mentioning, the mental stuff, the mental stories, and find another way to move forward, because it's about thriving. And we can realize that we thrive when we recognize and are present to that connection, to the web of connections.
Mm,
So I feel that the process of community building and the process of experiencing a circle or even a ceremony. So first of all, it it brings very deep personal healing. This is one of the potential benefits. So everything for me starts from the individual. So the way that we're able to bring ourselves out into society, the way we're able to bring ourselves to our relationships, to our loved ones, to our work, it all depends on how we are with ourselves, how we are feeling, what is our connection with ourselves. What I have experienced in this community building process personally is that there is when we take a risk by showing, when I take the risk by showing my vulnerability, there's just something magical that can happen. It's unpredictable, but there's a potential for an incredible space opening inside and something being released and cleared, and just a possibility to find much deeper peace inside oneself and acceptance. And I
mm,
think the result of that acceptance, once we are able to hold it for ourselves, it changes everything that we do. It changes all the ways that we are in the world. So the effects are multiplied. And also, like you said, we each one reflect each other through our humanity. So very often in a ceremony or in a circle, I can experience that somebody else will say exactly the thing that reflects my own personal experience.
Mm.
And the point here is not to say, ah, I missed my opportunity to express or to speak up, but it's actually to understand and to celebrate that we are connected beyond what we even understand, and that this invisible unconscious collective, it plays through us, it plays through individuals inside a group, and we can reflect each other in that way, and we can move each other forward in a faster way. We can support each other to expand and open up.
Yes, I think that's so true. Like there's so many things there because I feel like again, if those elements were brought into a broader community that the dynamics can shift so quickly. Like it's that's again one of the things I want to talk about, like in the ritual or ceremony space, like how quickly like transformation happens, healing happens, just by the dynamics of the space and bringing. So the first one we spoke to is having a voice or having you know that each person's voice is heard, and then you just spoke to two things that I noticed, which was like vulnerability, which I feel like there's not a lot of in our I feel like we're trying to slowly snuff vulnerability out. We don't value vulnerability. That's the other thing, which is um, I think comes from just again the previous age where everything was a fight, and or if it's not material or not, you can't put it on a shelf is what I call it. If you can't put it on a shelf and buy it, then it's not valued.
Mhm.
And I think that's what one of the components again of Aquarian age that are is going to be highlighted and valued is vulnerability. Because people have been throwing around authenticity for the last decade, right? But the reality is true authenticity requires vulnerability. But vulnerability is not spoken of. It's like almost a hush word. It's like, yeah, no, I don't want to be vulnerable. It's like, I'll be vulnerable for 2 seconds if somebody will pay me. Otherwise, I don't, I don't want to be vulnerable. And so I think that's a huge just highlight. How can we, that's a great question to me. Like, how can we bring more safe spaces for people to be vulnerable in our larger communities? The other one was reflection, like being able to hear your story in somebody else's story, which again, I find happens very naturally in your circles, but I haven't seen that always in like a meeting, right? Like in a meeting or a grouping of some other kind. Like it's always kind of this observance, and I'm watching you to be either entertained or informed, but um I'm not participating as my human experience, right? Um so I think that's another one that would be really nice to see more in our community, in our groupings.
And
There
Monica,
Yeah.
I really feel that mm, many people are, they're longing, they are thirsty also for expressing themselves in such a vulnerable way. It's just that a lot of times they need a little bit more spaciousness, and they need maybe a gentle invitation and space of silence. They need silence, in fact, for something to open up and to show up. So I believe that in circles, and the way at least I intend to organize them, I support this silence and the spaciousness so that there is time for everything to get settled inside oneself, and then for something else to emerge. Because what happened in my life very much until even very recently is that I constantly was feeling that I'm not given that space. I'm not given the space to express so that I'm heard, so that I feel deeply seen. I feel that there is space for me. And knowing myself, it took me some time also to discover that, to really how I function. I realized that a little bit extra spaciousness, that a little bit extra silence, just presence in silence, is what would allow something from very deep to open up. And it's such a fragile and such a gentle process, but I think this is what's important to also support when we get in group settings and when we get into circles and communities, and also to show an example. So to really maybe set the stage by expressing something first, and by doing that, giving somebody else the allowance to do the same. That they feel, okay, well, it's possible, she's doing that, and maybe not now, but maybe in the future, I feel that I'm able to express as well. So it's also very important to take the risk ourselves once we've built a certain level of confidence, to open up something, and
Mm.
by doing that also supporting others in doing the same.
Yeah, so much so. Because I had a very similar experience when I was younger, and it took me so long to put together words and to speak that the moment would always pass. There was never enough space for me to express. Um, and I say never, but that's what it felt like. It felt like never as a child. But like there couldn't be enough time in the world for me to get it together. Um, and I find that a lot of people, like, we call them introverts. I don't know if that's everywhere, but a lot of people like me do take longer. We do need more space. And it does, like, I that's one of my goals, I feel like, in my work, is to bring people who require that into the forefront, into leadership roles, into initiation roles, so that they can really allow for their wisdom to come forth. Because a lot of it is like you saying, like, you're for something larger to emerge. I feel like people that have maybe just a lot for it to emerge, like they have something very deep to offer, don't get the space to offer it. And then our societies, our communities, our spaces, even our families suffer from not allowing that to take place, enough space for them to speak up what is emerging or from them, you know? That there would be more balance in the family, for sure, you know?
Absolutely. And also another beautiful learning from this community building process for me is around the whole sequence actually of the community building. So what are the different stages that we go through? Because what happens, you mentioned family. In family, for instance, it might take years and decades before people face each other on a certain topic, because so many of us, we avoid conflict, for instance. And going through the community building process, one can understand that conflict is a necessary stage to go through, facing each other and even expressing chaotically everything that's there, releasing it, so that there's a possibility of a breakthrough eventually. And that we empty ourselves of all of that that we carry, all of what we sometimes accumulate over years and years, even that pain of not being able to express ourselves within family. I should really speak for myself, because this is my experience again, that it's been several decades that I've been learning how to do that little by little, and how it felt for me, what I needed for myself, so that I am now able to do that, to express and even to say an opposite opinion, so potentially to create a conflict, because I know that what's behind that is a possibility to empty and to connect on that deeper level, on a much more human heart level.
Mm.
and
Yes.
and there just create a space of greater unity within a family, for instance, and of course more harmony, more peace. So here we can talk about a family, or we can talk about different nations. It's the same process, really, or different ethnical groups within a society, where they're not able to meet each other, and they are just not hearing each other. So there's no integration actually happening, and no possibility to create something better for the whole, the society as a whole. So there's so many applications of this.
Yes. Yeah, I've seen and it's interesting because a lot of the people that drive up that um conversation or like the to have a conflicting idea, we consider them like almost troublemakers, right? Like we we're like, no, we're like, there's like, because that's not what we talk about here, right? And maybe like we can better understand that when we think of dinner conversation, right? If you're going to be around mixed company that may have different views, you don't bring up certain things, right? Um, and maybe at dinner we're seeking more communion, but in our conversations and our meetings and our group, and in our solution creating, that's exactly the time we would like the different opinions to come up so we can have all of what's necessary to be addressed in the room when we make our final decisions. And so, yeah, I thought of it first when I thought of like the one person in my family that's willing to have an argument, because everybody else is just like they either are loud enough to make an opinion that won't be, you know, that won't be contradicted, or or they just don't say anything, right? Like there's kind of that's the dynamic in my family now, and I find a lot of it still in our society where introverts almost don't feel like they can speak up, or they're not that nobody will listen to them if they do, you know?
And that's why it's what's happening now quite a lot. It's intentionally creating those spaces, because in a family it's a little bit tricky. Then I feel that there still needs to be an agreement of some sort, a commitment that, okay, we are all going in that direction, and with that commitment there's also safety, a certain safety and trust, I think, that can emerge, which is not always the case in families. And this is why I believe for introverts like us, perhaps for deeply empathic human beings, it's so important to find those different communities where that we can be part of, where we can experience safety, and either just to be there, to be present, and to see how I feel in such a space, or also to see how I can go into even expressing myself in such a space. But there is this intention behind, and intention behind the creation of that space. And also the intention includes, I believe, um, inclusivity of all the uniqueness, of all the kind of the celebration of all the weirdness that we can bring there. Because I think this is also where we're going as humanity. It's more also of recognizing each one of us, we have this very, very unique nature, and we have our own truth, and there is no one that is more right than my truth. It's just the diversity of these unique individuals, the richness of diversity, and the richness of this weirdness that each one of us will bring. So I think the intentionality behind that space is really what's helping also to create faster the effects that we're looking for, to create faster possibility to become more at peace, to become more self-accepting, to open up in a different world, in a different way to the world. And in fact, through that acceptance of the self, to start to find more confidence, to be more open, even in spaces that do not feel so safe. So my experience is that we can learn to create that safety for ourselves then in different kinds of environments. And this is very, very precious. So we don't depend anymore on the circumstances, but we intentionally create the kind of conditions that will provide safety internally,
Mm.
whether it's my attitude, my attitude towards what's happening, my feeling inside myself.
Yeah, it's so powerful because once you've had the experience, which again is something that I just like I think is so valuable that we miss a lot of the times when we're seeking to help people allowing them to have an experience of a thing before we require them to know it. You know, I feel like we can talk about ideas of being safe, but until somebody feels it, they don't even know what that means. I know this again personally because I was living with anxiety most of my life and I just didn't even know it. I was like, it was such a high level and was so constant. I wasn't even aware of the level of anxiety I was living in. And so when I first had like kind of those moments of feeling safe, I wasn't even to recognize it. But then when I realized, oh, wait a minute, like when I'm with this group or I'm with this person or I'm with this, right, I feel safe, right? And then you can say, oh, well, why don't I feel that way in the other things? And then you can start to apply that and take it with you. Like what are the things that I feel? What are the ways that I think when I do feel safe? Is another way to keep track of it, like you're speaking to. And so that you can bring that in when you're in. It's like, well, I can be that person in this space that is not quite that, right? And so it's important for us to have these spaces that we have that safe experience, like a circle. I think, um, yeah, I have never done one live. I've only been in arenas circles, by the way. I don't know if you knew that. I've only been in arena circles. And and I think it's important to be able to say, I don't even know if I would have recognized that it required Arena for me to even feel safe in the idea of a circle, you know? Uh, this brings up so many things for me because I think what we tend to do is we don't think that it's possible for us, and so we don't seek it. Right? But I think if you can start paying attention to those things that are setting off for you, that you just don't consider yourself awkward, that you consider it, oh well, I just haven't found that safe space or person or group yet, you know. And there is one for me. That's something you have to decide for yourself. But there is one for me, and not and seeking it, not being okay without that.
Yeah, I love that you're mentioning this, Monifa, because it's truly all about the experience. The experience is the key. So this is how I learn, is by living something. And very often that's exactly what I mentioned before or after somebody has been through a ceremony with me, is that once you've experienced something, and by experience I also mean it's very physical. So you have now the memory inside the body of the sensations of how it felt like. Nobody will ever be able to tell you this is not true. Nobody will be able to deny, because now you have a lived experience. It's undeniable. And my intention when I hold circles or ceremony or even in individual work is to, first of all, support the safety, and then support or guide people to have their experience, because there's no other way that the person, I feel, can truly integrate that new knowledge or new way of being. Because it's, if it's only on the mental level, it's disconnected from the body, from, it's not yet in the memory of the body,
Mhm.
and it needs to be brought down. And you know this very well, Monifa, because you're doing voice work, so this is exactly what your work is about also. It's bringing everything down to the level of sensation. And then, because this is how I can be truly in the present moment, it's when I am with my sensations and with my body, inside my body, with my feeling, with everything that's happening inside.
Mhm.
And another thing that I wanted to mention about the community building process, what I experienced in those groups was that healing is in the experience. So this is how healing actually takes place. That it's in the process of going through that. It's like living a life, compressed life which is compressed down to those 6 hours or those 4 hours, and having an experience. But with, if we are able to let go the possibility to arrive anywhere, to arrive to any goal, and simply just be with the experience, surrender all the agenda,
Mm.
and surrender to the unknown, because there's so much ambiguity, there's so much unknown, and it's also scary for many people to just be with that unknown, because we don't know how the process will continue. I don't know what's going to be happening with me. And in that process of being with all of that as much as we can, with full presence, with full attention and focus, that's where life really happens. For me, this is life. In fact, that whole experience is about life. It's how we are with ourselves, it's how we are with others, it's what we do with all of that, how we decide to be and to react.
So true. It's so true. That experiencing and that of awareness of where you are, that unknown of where we are going, that um those things are what make it um, the why we're here. It's the life that is the life. That's why we're here. And so yes, again, like having a safe place where unknown things can happen. Yeah, we need to have that experience in order for us to start to really embrace the unknown of the wider world. Um, big and that's so much of why this whole conversation I felt needed to happen. It needed to happen because yes, it's something where there's so many changes happening right now in our environment. And there's so many people that speak to it, as dealing with stress and having resilience, and all of those things are based on the ability to experience and feel safe in the unknown, and I think that's one of the reasons why our work are so aligned to see, your circle, and my voice work, because yeah, there's a lot of things you don't get to know in those spaces, but what you do get is enough space to feel supported by it, if you're bringing yourself with awareness and a bit of trust. There's always that kind of trust and hope in the possibility of what can happen, you know? So fabulous, so fabulous. Do you have any other points that you want to speak to? Because I know I didn't go in a linear fashion with this. So are there any other elements that you feel are important for people to know about, in Circle and in our efforts for what Peck is calling true community?
Hmm. So two words that I want to mention is embracing and inclusivity. And it's in relationship to myself, and it's in relationship to others in the circle. So I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation that being in the circle or being in the process of building community, we are learning how to handle differences. And the key for me towards finding balance and towards arriving to harmony beyond our differences is that embrace. And that embrace is in opposition to dividing or division. And it's division or dividing within myself, first of all. So how do I make space, not just for the others in the circle, but how do I make space for myself? How do I include myself? Because if I am moved to express and I do not do that, it means that I exclude myself. I do not allow that space for myself. And there's that exclusion that takes place. So it's these are, I would say, kind of the pillars, the ways of being that can support community and can support the circle. It's that inclusivity internally as well as externally. It's this embrace. Okay, I embrace even the parts of me that are really, really painful and that I'm really ashamed of. And I really don't want to speak, but I'm so on fire that I have to speak about that. And I have to let it out. And I just have to empty it, because otherwise I explode, I get sick. So this is also the process of integrating through that inner embrace. And I just wanted to mention this is a very, very big part of this whole journey and the process. And the same applies to ceremonies that I do. I always present a ceremony as a journey towards wholeness. So it's a journey towards that greater integrity, integration of ourselves. We can speak about psychic integration, integration of the soul. Some people call it even soul retrieval, or just integrating all the psychological aspects of ourselves, integrating different qualities, our background. My personal struggle for many years, it was how to integrate my background into where I see myself now, how to connect all the different parts of my life. So I think this process of embracing integration that comes with it, it's really at the core of the process of uh, becoming the one that is able to really bring to the world our deepest gifts and desires. So for me, this is the core of that process. And sometimes, I hear people say, "There's no time. There's no more time." This is something I feel like you alluded a little bit to also, Manifa, in the current, in with what's happening in the world on many different levels, social, environmental, political. Some people feel like we are under pressure, but we have like to hurry to do something. And my experience in the community building process has been that once I just surrender to the process of this moment, to that which is on fire inside of me, to my sensations, to my body, to the experience I'm having with the others, eventually I'm able to realize that when I'm in that presence, I have all the time of my life. That pressure is completely mental, and it's usually coming up from certain fears, or from the fear, maybe the remembrance of some painful past experiences. Yet when I am able to keep bringing myself more and more into the process of the now, with those other people, with myself, with what I'm experiencing, there is that spaciousness, and there is truly a feeling that emerges that there is no need to rush. Everything is here and everything is possible.
Mm.
There is again that peace that comes.
Wow, that's such a feminine. Such an ephemeral quality of um of time, you know. Uh and that is something I've witnessed every time I'm in your presence um of that, not allowing the the fallacy of time to drive or feel like we need to rush or push things into existence, including our words. I've always been super sensitive to how slow I speak, and I never feel rushed when I'm with you. That I need to speak faster or get it together. It's kind of my underlying thought process around that. Um, and that's something that I think I can say again. It's so few people. So I don't know if I know anybody else who gives me as much space as you do to that I feel I can take my time when I'm speaking. Um, it's just so precious, you know. It's so precious because everywhere, especially again online, where it feels crowded and it's like we have to fight for the attention and we have to fight for, you know, every second you're going to lose somebody, you know, because they only have so much time. Like that feeling of pressure online, um, that, you know, just saying no, like this is the space, this is where we are, and this is what we're doing, and allowing it is the other part. I feel like there we can know it a lot of times. I feel a lot of us who've had like meditative experiences know that time is a sensed thing, but we often um, want to qualify that for the grander public. And what I've seen in you is that ability to just say, no, this is where we are. This is what we're doing. Um, and yeah, it's so precious. It's so precious.
It's very precious for me to hear that, Monifa. I I thank you, and I hear you, because this is where I'm coming from also. I'm coming from that place also of experiencing being completely frozen when I had to express, or when I was invited to express, or feeling awkward, or not having those words, like you say, not finding the right words, or finding them too late. So as I've been through all of that myself, I know I know how important it is for to give space to the others, and to give that gentle support. So this is this is just naturally what I bring to the spaces that I create. It's kind of like an extension of myself, as as being, kind of the wounded healer, like this archetype, if I could bring it here, that we share the gifts that have emerged from our own experience, from having been through our own life experience.
So true. And again, the principal reason why this conversation is so important, you know, because our experience is so pronounced, especially in these last, you know, in our lifetimes, you know, uh, it's been so pronounced that the other is more valuable, you know, and so our again, when you speak to the wounded healer, our wounds are not feeling that value of being this other type of expressor. Um, and and so it's so in that way we are the healing or the balance or the integration that's required for our societies. If you felt that way, what I know is we need you. You know, we need you to bring these safe spaces. We need you to acknowledge where you can initiate these spaces. And we need you to really honor the wisdom and the emergence that you uh, are, and you know that you recognize the value of being that human human that human, that being, your beingness is required for us to um, get all the things that need to emerge in this new space, in this new age, to happen. Yeah. So good. Thank you so much, Arina. There's really no better person I could have had this conversation with in a way that it needed to be had. And I really hope that you will get in touch with Arina. She has her information in our description box on YouTube. It's also on our postings on Facebook. Um, and if you can join her on her group, or like her business page, or follow her on Instagram, and she's starting to do more there as well. And I promise you want to be there for what she decides to express to you next. Thank you so much, Arina.
Thank you, Monifa, for the opportunity to be with you and to speak about such an incredible and deep topic. So needed right now. Yeah.
Yes, yes, I agree. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you for everybody who came and who at some point will listen to this conversation. I hope that you get something out of it for yourself.
Yes, yes. Yes. Thank you and have a great rest of your evening. She is in Latvia, and so it's a totally different time frame. So I thank you for sharing your space and your deep evening with us. And I will see you. I will see you later this week. And anybody who wants to see us later, just find us on Facebook. Subscribe to the channel, and come to one of our safe spaces. We've got a couple for you. All right.